So that's the deluxe reverb that was fixed by AI yesterday, apparently. Didn't even know I had AI. Didn't know I had any form of I. How about you guys out there? Speaking of I just became aware the other day that due to the forgot to turn the mic on. Haha. Let's try that again. All right. So, okay. You heard the guitar, but then I had the voice muted so you didn't hear me go at the start. Anyway, where was I saying? That's the deluxe reverb reissue that was apparently repaired by AI yesterday, according to one very insightful commenter. I don't know that I have any form of A or otherwise, but yesterday I became very aware that due to AI and all the data centers, the cost of memory has gone up through the roof to the point where if you wanted to buy a hard drive from Western Digital, you cannot because the data centers have bought their entire run. And with the tariffs and China retaliating with restrictions on rare earth elements and stuff, it's really hard to get the components to make memory. So this is a 2 terabyte. This is a 1 terabyte. This is a 2 terabyte external SD drive. Samsung. I use these for backing up YouTube videos and photos and all kinds of data. This 1 terabyte I bought for like $80. It's now $250. This 2 terabyte I bought for like $150. It's now over $350. The SD cards I use in the cameras rather, the 128 gigabytes that were $40 last August when I last bought one are now $110. It's kind of get worse and worse and worse. So thank you, AI. In addition to driving up all the utility companies in the entire country and having a huge environmental impact, apparently we're not going to be able to afford to get inexpensive phones and tablets and computers or Blu-ray players over the coming years. So I'm not sure where... Could we rein back on the artificial bit and ramp up on the intelligence bit? Because I really don't need any of the shit that AI is giving us as far as these data centers are concerned. It just seems like one more thing making the world very expensive and unpleasant to be in. Sorry to rant about the thing. It's just crazy. Yeah, graphics cards as well. I mean, a lot of things use those components, not just memory. It's going to be really bad. Anyway, so let's talk about old analog shit. We can still get all the stuff for that. This week, at least. Let's see. Teleblaster's got a question there. Deluxe Reverb Bright Cap, remove or replace with a different value. If replace, any recommended values? Most players are going to be happier without the bright cap. This one has no bright cap. And depending on the pick used and the pickup, it's very bright. If I were to turn the treble up even more, it'd get even brighter. However, if you're playing primarily Gibsons, that bright cap on a deluxe reverb, that 47 picofarad, may be a good choice just to give a little more air because a lot of guitars with humbuckers, not just Gibsons, need that little bit of help. So if you're primarily playing Strats, Tellies, other guitars with single coils, you may like to have that bright cap. If you're playing Gibsons and other humbucker things, only reverse that. If you have the single coils, you probably don't need that bright cap. Duh. Not enough coffee yet. But if you're using darker humbuckers, you may like that 47 picofarad. I wouldn't change the value. I would either just keep it in, remove it, or if you want a little bit of it, maybe take it out and put a new 47 picofarad in series with the 220K resistor across those two lugs. That'll give you a little bit of a bright cap. Old Guy Rocks 66 received his K-Line Springfield on February 28th. Wow. All I'm going to say is more S-type guitar patch. Check out this guitar. Cheers. Yep. Well, coincidentally, I like them. These are really, I aesthetically don't care for the headstock, but, that's the part of the guitar I see the least when I'm playing it. Very nice. And they're pretty from the neck down. I've told Chris this. Still better looking than a PRS headstock. Those things seem to sell all right. Hello to everyone. Sorry about forgetting to turn the microphone at the beginning. Usually I have it set up like this so that the microphone is gated and hence muted if anything is picked up by that microphone. So you're barely gonna hear anything that I say when I'm playing, but then it comes back. But because at the beginning of the stream, I've noticed in the past, if I have the mic on at the beginning, you hear me go in the background when I don't think it's happening yet. And I just forgot to push the magic button and turn it on. So let's see. Hey, John Rame. He's converted his AA964 Princeton non-reverb to the 5F11 Tweed Vibrolux reversible mods. I've got the 1 meg audio taper tone pot. But the 5F11 Schemo calls for a 1 meg linear tone volume pot. Is that for real? Yeah. The 5F11 has so little gain naturally that they use the linear taper volume pot so that it gets loud. If you put an audio taper volume pot in your amp, you're going to have no volume until you get to noon. So that's why on the 5F11. Now, the 1 meg audio tone pot for the tone would be better as a linear. So I much prefer a linear for the tone pot in any of the Tweed Fender stuff that uses the traditional 5E3 Deluxe kind of tone circuit. Otherwise, all your treble gets kind of bunched up towards the top. But you can certainly use either pot in either position, but you'll have to turn the knob up a lot more to hear it if you have the audio taper volume. Thank you, Martin. Happy Easter to everyone. Happy Passover to everyone. May your herbs be just the right amount of bitter. Hey, Gerben. Getting an AC15C1 and preparing for a JMI mod. Diving into the schematic, I'd lower cap values. PI input 22 nanofarad, PI ground 100 nanofarad as is. PI output is 47 nanofarad. Will this totally deviate from JMI for the worse? Well, it's a tricky subject because you can't compare the AC15C1 to the JMI AC15. They're very different circuits, very different amps, very different behaviors. What you need to do is approach the AC15C1 as what it is. It is a 15-watt version of the AC30 without the vibrato channel. So I agree with lowering the phase inverter input to 22 nanofarad. The outputs can be either 47 nanofarad or 22 nanofarad. I think 22 nanofarad is absolutely fine. You have tons of low end with those in a Marshall, and the 22 nanofarad 220K leaks are the same. But you can use the 47 nanofarad. I don't like the 100 or 150 nanofarad. I think that's stupid. The PI ground, it's really just a mute. You can have the two input caps on the phase inverter match. They could both be 22s on the AC15C1. Yeah, Greg, I saw your comment on the last one, so I decided to go back to the photos rather than just mirroring what I'm doing here. I say in real time, it's got like a 1 second or less delay when I do that. But the trouble with this app, this is just the iPad Photos app, is it does the changes too fast, but not always consistently. And it also tries to play PBS documentary and do little slow zooms and change, crop in. So it's not always showing you what I intended, even though it's in the background, it's blurry. It's not ever going to be what I really want people to see. But that photo of that glass dress, in the photo you see the whole thing. So I need to find a different slideshow app because the one that comes in the iPad sucks, which is weird because the one on that comes with Apple TV is perfect. If they just had that on that, I'd be very happy. Greetings from the Netherlands. Well, thank you, Gerben. Greetings from Memphis. Hey, Jorge. Super Reverb reissue has very cold bias, 26 milliamp max with different sets of tubes. Causes, I tack soldered 100K into R59. Now max current is 46 milliamps. Solved. Anything else? Thanks. Okay, well, I don't remember what R59 is. Let me look that up so we're on the same page of the Super Reverb schematic reissue. Sorry, people are always like, should I change R56? I'm like, I don't know. I don't remember. I have a hard enough time with numbers without that kind of stuff. I know the schematic like the back of my hand, but as far as what the parts numbers were, I'd have to work on an awful lot more of them. I never refer to the schematic very, very often on these things anymore. Anyway, all right, so Super Reverb schematic. That's one of those dang things where, can I rotate it clockwise to see? Not without downloading it. So let me just zoom in and take my chances. Just a second. I'm gonna have an answer for you. All right, so bias supply. All right, so R59. Well, R59, if that's what this is, in stock is a 470 ohm, and you're saying you change it to 100K? Well, no. Here, all right. The purpose of R59, which is the limiting resistor, is just to limit current in the Super Reverb. In other amps like the Princeton, which is deriving its bias supply from one of the HTs, is to do a massive voltage drop. So a Princeton has a 100K resistor in that spot, which does also limit current, but also drops the AC voltage present down from 150, 200, whatever it is on a Princeton, down to 50-ish, and then it goes to the diode, which in this case is D1 if you're playing the home game. The place where you want to adjust your bias range in a deluxe reverb reissue is, let's see, they have it drawn so strangely where the bias adjustment is in a different part of the schematic. All right, you want to look at, oh wait, that is R59. I'm sorry, this is an old schematic. Okay, so that's the 470 is 69. Sorry, it's like a Xerox of a Xerox that I'm looking at right now. So never mind on that. And the actual answer is R59 in stock form is a 27K. So you change the correct resistor. I've never needed to make that be a 100K in a Super Reverb, but it would not be uncommon to make that be like a 33 or 39, even to 47K. But that is the way to, you're in the right place to change it. Max current 46 milliamp per tube, or is that total? I don't look at it in terms of, I don't set it for a milliamp draw. To me, what the actual milliamp draw is almost coincidental to my actual target, which let me see if I can share what I actually do on here. And then what I just said makes more sense. So let me call up how I actually bias an amp. Let me call this up and I'll share it with you. All right. So I've got some Marshall or other thing here with EL34s that I last biased. Let me get it. So I'm only showing you part of this, just not to hide things from you, but just so there's less confusion about what I'm showing you here. All right, so now let me share this, and I want, where's the thing? Show numbers. All right, so you can see here, EL34 is a 25 watt tube. I just think of it as a push side and the pull side. In terms of which role each tube or pair of tubes plays. In this case, it was a 50 watt amp. It had one EL34 per side. If this were a 100 watt amp, here where it says tubes, I'd say 2. I measure the primary DCR resistance between the center tap of the output transformer and the plate of each tube. I measure what the mains is. So when I first did this measurement, it was 119. When I did the second measurement, it was 120. If it was much less than 119, if it was much more than 121, I might have used a variac. I measure the bias voltage at pin 5. I measure the plate voltage. And then I do a measurement across the primary of each side to the center tap of the output transformer. And that tells me what my actual voltage across that resistance drop is. So in this top one, it was 2.3 and then 2.08. And that told me by looking here that I was actually getting 62.5% and 54.4%. You'll see here I've got 50, 60, and 70. Those are my rough targets. So if I measure it and it's like 1.7, 1.6, I know that I'm below 50%. I don't have to keep measuring it. I can raise it. If it's above 2.5, 2.6, I know that I'm above my target. I don't have to keep measuring. I can lower it. And if I know that, hey, I usually want it to be between 1.8 and 2.2 to get between 50 and 60, then I can turn the pot while I'm measuring just one side of the DCR and just kind of get closer to where I want it to be. Then I'll measure both tubes and be sure of all these things. And then coincidental to all that, when I look at the final here, where I have 2.02 on the pull tube and 2.12 measured voltage across the primary to the center tap on the push tube. That puts, I mean, both tubes are 55% dissipation. This amp had a variable adjustment for the bias voltage, so I was able to balance the two pairs out by adjusting the bias. And then once I know that I have that, I know that I had 29.3 and 29.6 milliamps per tube, if that makes sense. But I don't say I want, hey, 29 milliamp. I say I want a voltage which is reflective of the current drawn by that tube, ignoring the screen voltage, screen current. Hopefully that makes sense. It's much easier to do than to talk about sometimes. Let me close that and go back to our regular progress. So I cannot tell you what the ideal bias for your super reverb is in terms of milliamps. What I would say is that the average super reverb is going to behave its best between 50% and 65% idle dissipation with 120 volts coming out of the wall. And whatever that turns out to be with the tubes you're using, maybe anywhere from 39 to 43 milliamps. I don't know what they are, though. Thanks, Joshua. Appreciate that. Yeah, I was taking pictures of our azaleas, which are doing their big spring bloom, and testing how, if I could get a close-up in focus shot of a flying bumblebee, and that was at 1/18,000th of a second, and the bee's in focus, but its wings are still a blur. So working on it. Did Amnesia, hey, came across a 72 dual Showman, blows fuses and won't turn on, wondering if it is worth fixing, no profit ever. Is worth fixing, most likely, unless you've got a dead power transformer. I mean, it still might be worth fixing, but probably just it's got blown screen grid resistors and needs to be recapped, same as it ever was. That could, your questions could say 64 twin, 72 dual Showman, 76 super reverb. Old amps, they get neglected. They don't work. Sometimes it's only like $100 worth of time and parts, and you're back in business. Now, 72 is the last good year as far as the baffles go. Though some 72s have the glued-in baffles. I think some 72s still have the screwed-on baffle. If it's a screwed-on baffle cab, well, it's a dual Showman. It's a head. Doesn't really matter, does it? Yeah, I'd say it's probably worth it. Thoughts on the 5EA low-power Tweed Twin? Interesting circuit with a higher output and cathode phase inverter. I'm considering building. Any advice or on tweaks or mods I recommend? It's a nice sounding app. It's an interesting sounding app. If you're just out of curiosity want to experience one, go for it. I think there's an awfully good reason that the 5F8 and the 5F6A basement and twin variations were like, oh, okay, this is the blueprint for the future. And the 5E8, the 5E8 was almost there, but kind of weird in certain ways. I know that Keith Richards seems to like them. Do I have a favorite contact cleaner spray? Yes. This is my favorite contact cleaner. Her name is Gladys. Don't use Gladys in pots. Don't use Gladys in tube sockets unless you then follow Gladys up with some isopropyl alcohol to get Gladys out of the tube sockets. But for actual electrical contact cleaning, this stuff is great. Thank you, Gladys. Right next to Gladys is some F5 Fader Lube, which is good for pots, but, well, the less we say about George, the better. Hey, Chris R. Finished a 65 AC4 reverb and 68K input upgrade. Sounds amazing. The perfect amp for London flat. Great. Good. Glad to hear it. Can crank it and not get police called. Why doesn't anyone just clone this basic circuit? Well, Vox keeps selling you things that are supposed to be that, and they're not. So if Vox can't do it, I bet someone out there has done it. It's a really cool sounding little amp. I prefer the 10, but man, I'm so glad that you did the input jack mod, because in stock form it is neutered. Hey, Sire, do tubes actually matter if you're using a high headroom amp set really clean with drive coming from the pedals? Or do tubes take pedals differently even at clean linear levels in volume? I mean, are you talking about cheap, readily available tubes versus high-end new old stock tubes? Or are you talking about tubes versus solid state? Traditionally, tubes take pedals, particularly boost and overdrive pedals, better than solid state. Traditionally. They've made a lot of strides in the last 10 years with the modeling stuff, which is also a form of solid state. So all modeling amps are solid state. Not all solid state amps are modeling amps. So depending on the nature of the modeling and the nature and quality of the analog to digital converters that are being used, there are current production hybrid, not hybrid, but solid state modelers, which do take pedals as well as tubes, or comparably. Traditionally, there have been a very few solid state amps which have taken pedals very well. I'm talking non-modeling solid state, discrete analog but solid state circuits, which have taken pedals well. There have been some of the Pierce amps of the mid and late 80s. But the majority of solid state amps clipped with when the input signal pushes, because tubes compress and distort in pleasing ways without hard clipping. By the time you get to hard clipping in a tube, you think, that sounds awesome. If you get to hard clipping in an op amp or a transistor, you're like, that sounds like shit. So it's not a apples to apples thing. If you're playing at home with a high headroom amp, really clean, you're probably not going to hear any difference between using a twin or using a good quality solid state modeler. But every amp reacts to every overdrive pedal slightly differently. So, hey Ethos, what difference would changing the value up or down of the 3.3 reverb mix resistor in a deluxe reverb due to the sound of the reverb? I'm having trouble finding a 1 watt 3.3 meg resistor from Mauser or DigiKey. Well, first of all, it doesn't need to be 1 watt. It can be a half watt. That's what they traditionally used. Second of all, they have them. I've never had a problem finding one, but you don't need it to be 1 watt. There's only AC signal passing through there. It is giving you a big voltage divider and mix setup to the next stage, because what you're doing, if you ignore the reverb side of things, is you are taking an amplified signal from one triode and feeding it through a plate, a coupling cap, then a resistor, and then some path to ground into the next stage. And because you're doing a mix with the reverb, which does form a fairly large path to ground through its reverb pot, which is also the grid leak of the next stage. If you don't have like a 3 meg or at least a 2 meg resistor there, you're going to have way more dry than you're going to have wet. And your dry is going to be really loud and distorted because you've got an already amplified signal that's going to be dropping down a very slight bit, if at all, and then getting amplified again. So remember, amplifying stages is not like it was this level and then goes to this level and here. It goes to this stage, it's here. It goes to the next stage. It can be way up here. It can be a big jump. And that 3.3 meg lowers the signal, so that the goal at Fender was so that the signal coming out of V1B or V2B in this case is going to be the same as the signal coming out of V4B as far as the dry goes. Now, they didn't quite get it. It's slightly higher, but that's what that resistor is doing. And the 10 picofarad across it is restoring some of the highs the high-end loss that you would normally get with a 3.3 meg resistor followed by a path to ground, which is like 140K, 140-ish K. It's a little bit complicated because you get the pot in series with a 470K, but it's in parallel with a 220K to ground. So about 140 something K is what it actually measures. But you can find a half watt resistor, no problem. If I wanted to go, and I don't have time right now, I already did the super reverb schematic thing, but there are 1 meg resistors, but you don't need a 1 meg resistor for that. Not 1 meg, 1 watt. And if you had a 3 meg resistor, you wouldn't hear much difference. Tremolo's circuit on a 2275-65 Music Man cutting out. Any circuit upgrades? Has a 12x7 phase inverter. Thank you, Jam. Hey, Mullet. Thanks, you Jam. Thank you. Thank you, Mullet, the guitar guru. I do not know that circuit well enough to tell you. If I had that amp come in, I'd have to look up the schematic and figure out what they're doing with it. But if the tremolo is cutting out, if that's is that an optical tremolo, or is that using I don't know if they're using an optical tremolo in that, or if they're using transistors or what in that Music Man. Sorry. I've not had a tremolo go out in the various Music Man amps that I have worked on, so I've never had to study that circuit. It's probably pretty simple. Nothing in any of these amps that Fender designed at that time were rocket science, but I don't know it well enough to tell you in the middle of a stream. Sorry. Hey, Sash DC, looking to achieve the sort of tweed-style drive with one or multiple pedals to run through my Silverface Twin. Thoughts? Um, I don't know what a tweed style drive is. Harvard doesn't have a lot of drive. Princeton has almost no drive. A 5E3's got a ton of drive, and a 5F6A's got tons of drive, but it's a very different sound. So they're all very different sounds. I think rather than saying a tweed style drive, if you want me to help you or want anyone who does this to be able to help you, don't say tweed style drive. Say, I really like the sound David Gilmour got on the first solo of Dogs, or I really like what Stevie Ray Vaughan got on, Boot Heel Blues or whatever. What was the name of that song? Anyway, say your ultimate sound is the sound he got on Ain't Gonna Give Up on Love or something for that solo. Or Life Without You. That's a badass sound on the solo to Life Without You. Give us recorded examples of the sounds you're after, and we might have more educated guesses. But tweed sound is the bad result of internet marketing, and everything's a tweed sound. Everything's a blackface sound. Everything's a British sound. I mean, I can get the exact sound of the Sweet, which most people here would say, that's awful. It's an authentic British sound. Or Mick Ronson without the rest of the Spiders. There's going to be some painfully bright sounds. And I love all that stuff. But, it's all British. It narrows it down to a subcontinent. Sorry, pet peeve of mine. But it also means that you can't get the help you're looking for because the terms are too vague. Yeah, Jorge, the fixed bias resistor in stock form should have been 27K, not 23K. I still think 100K is too large. You might have something else wrong in your circuit where you're having to drop it down as much as you are. But in stock form, you shouldn't have to. Hey, Ramallah Mad. I can't. I'm not singling you out when I have no way of how to pronounce some of these names when there are no capitals. Tell me where one series of sounds starts and the other one stops. I'm gonna call you Rama, and Ramallah Mad maybe. Anyway, I have not played through the new AC30 hand-wired. I've played through the 15 and the 10. And the 10's not very good. The 15 is good with some help. I've got videos on those up on the channel. And the 30 is just the 15, including the same good points and the same mistakes in a larger output. Yeah, John, I didn't want to call him Ramalama Ding Dong to his face, but I did have that thought. But if I don't know where he's from, that may not make any sense to him. So, and no offense to you, Ramallah, it's not a cultural bias or anything. It's just hard for me to know how to pronounce some of the usernames when they all run together like that. If you have the AC30C stock head, there's not much of a difference, other than the new ones are prettier as far as the cosmetics on the outside. On the inside, they're prettier if you squint and you don't know what you're looking at. But I'm not seeing anything in those things. The hand-wireds that make it worth the extra money. It's the wrong hands doing the wiring. Yeah, Ramalama Ding Dong. Okay, okay. You are Ramalama. You're Ramalama DD1. Gotcha. All right. See, I got that. Now, who put the bop in my bop shabop shabop? Dip. Let's see. Where were we? Hey. John, my guitar tone knob only seems to cut treble when it's 9 to 10. Would I just swap connections to pins 1 and 3 in the pot to make the gradual part of the taper line up with the effective window? I'm not sure what you're saying. Are you saying that when you're playing your guitar, that all your change is happening from 10 to 9 on the tone pot like this? This is a correctly wired tone pot, and as I move it from 9 to 10, from 10 to 9, you hear almost no difference. Let's see, when do we hear it? Begin to hear it at 8. By 5, it's very noticeable. By about 3, it's really dark. And there's not a ton of change between 0 and 3, or 1 and 3 on this pot. But I need to clean that pot apparently. You may have your tone pot wired backwards. Lugs 2 and 3 are the lugs that are. I'm sorry, 1 and 2 are the lugs used in a tone circuit. If you're, if you had it backwards, it would just work counterclockwise. So if it's going from no roll off to full roll off between 10 and 9, you got a faulty pot. I don't know what guitar this is, but you need a good quality pot. You got 500K or 250K audio, depending on the guitar and circuit, and then you're just using lugs 1 and 2. If you swap connections to 1 and 3 of the pot, you'll have no change whatsoever, because 1 and 3 are just the outside range of that pot. So if you've got a 250K pot, you'd always have 250K, and the wiper moving back and forth between 1 and 3 would do nothing. So I think you probably have a defective pot. Hey, Rocket Mass, do electrolytics last longer operating further under their max or operating voltage? E.g., any benefit to using, any benefit to getting MOD's 80 microfarad 500 volt for reservoir over 70 microfarad 350 or 63? Yeah. The rating of a capacitor is at its max temperature and its max voltage. So as I mentioned in that Princeton video the other day, I used 500 volt caps rated for 105 degrees for 12,000 hours. So those caps, 20 microfarad, expected to last 12,000 hours at 105 degrees Fahrenheit at 500 volts, or just below that. The amp itself is not going to get anywhere near 105 degrees, and the amp itself is not going to have more than maybe 350, 370 volts present. So those caps are going to last a really long time. So if you have some margin, the caps last longer than they're rated. For example, the caps that I use all the time for cathode bypass caps in Fenders are only rated for 2,000 hours at 63 volts. However, they typically have 1 to 2 volts on them in most cathode conditions, and there's not going to be any heat present, so there's no real substantial voltage, no heat present, and I expect those 2,000 hour caps will last as long as the 12,000 hour caps on the large ones. So yes, it used to be that as you paid for a cap with a much higher rated voltage, the cap would physically be much larger, be much more expensive. Now those 63 volt cathodes that I use instead of 20 volt or 25 or 16 volt cathodes caps are the same size or are smaller than yesterday's 16 volt caps. So, and they don't cost much. So as long as you're not paying a size penalty. Now there's a trade-off. You don't need to use a 500 volt cap in a bias supply that's never going to get more than negative 60 volts. So use a 100 volt cap there. Save this time and money, because there is a big difference in size between 500 volts and 100 volts. Okay, Jorge, you put the 100K in parallel. All right, yeah, you should be good on that. Sorry, typing about this stuff can be tough sometimes, especially when I'm apparently being a dumbass today. Sorry about that. Yeah, so you got 27K down to 17K. You've increased the current. Yeah, absolutely. Are there benefits to imitating a tube rectifier sag in a solid-state rectified tube amp? Pros, cons. Well, you're going to get some sag, but you're also going to get the voltage drop. Let's see, the best way to explain this. Most players, if they spend time with a bunch of different amps, notice the sonic qualities and feel differences of those amps. So you may play a JTM 45 or a Bassman and get a sense of how it responds and how it generally sounds. Then you play a 50-watt Marshall, and it has a different response and a different character to its sound. From the outside and from the average player's perspective, the difference between those amps is the JTM 45 and the Bassman have rectifier tubes. The 50-watt Marshall is solid state, so you think, oh, that kind of compressed feel that I'm getting, that if I really dig in, it's kind of sags, that must be due to the rectifier tube. To a very small degree, some of it's coming from the rectifier tube. But one of the other things that people aren't aware of is that if you have a solid state amp, solid state rectifier like the 50-watt Marshall, 100-watt Marshall, you can have much more filtering. A GZ34 5AR4 are the most commonly used rectifier tubes for larger amps from the deluxe reverb up. Those have a max capacitance on their first stage. Their load capacitance load is maxed out at like 62, 64 microfarad. So you cannot use 100 microfarad on there unless you're a Mesa and hate your customers. They do that. They kill tubes. That's one of the reasons Mesa tried to do the dual rectifiers and stuff to get higher. There's a max B plus limit and a max capacitance limit with a tube rectifier. So you can't get as loud an amp, you can't have as well filtered an amp, which means you're going to have a slower response. You're not going to have as tight a bass. So if you go to solid state, which used to be expensive because diodes used to be very expensive, then all of a sudden you can say, all right, I'm going to have 100 microfarad for that first stage, and we're going to have a B plus of 500, which you cannot do with any rectifier unless you paralleled them. But if you're going to say, well, I want this thing to be simple, and back in the day, rectifier tubes you get at any dime store, around the corner from you, whereas diodes were new and expensive and rare. It was good enough. So you get a Bassman, you get a JTM 45. It's loud. It's not as well filtered. The bass response is soft. You push it really hard, you get sag. So what's actually happening is, yes, the rectifier contributes a little bit to the current limiting because you can pull more current through diodes than you can through a rectifier tube. That's a really gross oversimplification. Don't crucify me in the comments. But due to the limitations of the design, where you cannot have the immediacy of a big filter section with a tube rectifier, people see the visual difference to the player is just whether it has a tube or not, and all the rest of it is just down to that tube or not. The tube is more of a symptom or an indicator than a cause, if that makes sense. But, as far as emulating the voltage drop and whatever amount of sag the tube rectifier does contribute, like the AC30C and AC15C both do a good job of that because they've got, I believe, 82 ohm 5-watt resistors on the HT side of the power transformer secondary before rectification, which is solid state, but it gives you the same voltage drop and much the same feel as the GZ34, and then they have more or less the same filtering they would have had if they had a tube rectifier. So the amp is behaving much the same way they would have if they had used a 5U4GB or GZ34 or a GZ or 5AR4, but they don't have to use as large and expensive a power transformer. They don't have to have another tube in the amp, which gets really hot, and there's one less thing to fail. Hey, Steve, I saw that you called yesterday. I meant to call you this morning, and I got caught up in my honeydew. So I'll give you a call this afternoon after the stream, and I'd very much appreciate that, sir. And your Rivera is coming to the channel this week. Hey, George, or Jorge. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that, but I appreciate you being here. Thank you very much. Let me know the right way to pronounce that, and I'll give it a shot. Which is an offer I will not extend to this guy. Then the rest of it. I don't know how to. I don't know how to approach that other with cautious respect. I accidentally left my Vibrochamp on all night last night. I did recently rebias it, so it runs about 70%. Did that wear the tubes out? Nah, nah. You're gonna have a slightly higher utility bill this month. That's it, because you used a little more power. Your Vibrochamps should, and if that affected your Vibrochamp, your tubes were already on the decline. You'll be fine. It's funny. I have a video up on the channel. I think it's called Blues Junior Left On Overnight. Blues Junior had a failure. The owner thought it's because the amp had been left on overnight. And in that video, I go to great lengths to say it wasn't because he left it on overnight. It's because the amp already had a problem, and it just happened to coincide with the time he left it on. And I still to this day get comments saying, "Man, I left my amp on all the time, overnight all the time. I had no problem. I don't know what you're talking about. You're an idiot." Flames. Good to hear that, Jorge. Up the thumb. That sounds terrible, Diego. I'm glad you're here, Diego, and any other German viewers. I've been working. I try. It always blows my mind when I travel and we get to a city and they don't pronounce it the way it's known on our maps or the way Americans pronounce it. I'm like, why don't we just learn to say it their way? It's some of the places would be tough, but I could say München rather than Munich. I can say Firenze rather than Florence. I can say Lisboa rather than Lisbon. I don't understand why the country where the thing is doesn't get to say, and this is what we refer to as. It's strange, Anyway, I have some lenses made by a company that used to be German, which was bought by a Japanese firm, but is still using the original brand name. And I've been trying to be able to say it, Voigtländer. Is that correct? It's Voigtla with the umlaut Ndeer. Voigtländer. I've been listening to a German video from a German channel on that, and I always want to make sure I'm getting it right, not sounding like an American trying to clear his throat. So let me know if I got anywhere close to that. But it's so strange, and then I'll see a video made by someone in that city or that country, and if they're doing the video in English, they will still use the American or British pronunciation of their place. I'm like, why? Why? I don't want people to think that I live in, I don't know, Memphis, Memphis, which is actually Egyptian. Anyway, where were we? Bonjour to you too. Hello, hello. Hey, John, I don't rag on the Eurotube probes. I've never, maybe Brad does. So, Voigtländer. Which half, Martin? You may be the wrong half to ask. See, because I heard this one guy who was German, and he definitely said as a V rather than an F, and he totally ignored the I. It was vote. He was saying vote, though that's kind of soft, falling into the T. Voigtländer. But you're saying so Voigtländer. I'm gonna have to find a German and make them say all these things for me. I just want to get there. I want to get there. I don't want to be the ugly American. Anyway, Brad may rag on it. I don't rag on it. I just don't use probes because I don't need to. But for the average user who has no business getting in with the voltages that I play with, I think a good set of probes would be fine. I'm glad to know that they're doing the plate cathode voltage and the plate current. Now, do you know if they are doing an automatic subtraction of the screen current? Hey, Greg. Yeah, I've got some trainers up on the channel. I don't remember all of the model numbers, but yeah, I'm a big fan of the YVA two Bassmasters, especially. Thank you, Alex. Did you see Finding My Way at the Canadian Awards show the other night? I guess that was last week. I'm not gonna emulate it here on a Strat into a deluxe reverb, but it made me very happy. It's not one of my favorite songs of theirs, and Getty cannot in any way sing that song like he did when he was 18. But it was great to see them out and having fun again. And Annika sounded great. Cooking anything interesting this Easter? I know most do a ham, but I plan on grilling some lamb for my wife and myself with roast potatoes this year. That sounds good, Matt. Because I am divorced and my kids have to appease both sides of the family, we're doing an Easter brunch here tomorrow. And I'm like, what should I do that everyone will eat that's easy? So I'm going to do something pretty simple. I'm going to steam some. I'm going to steam some asparagus and toast some English muffins, and I'm gonna make eggs Benedict. So I've got the hollandaise for the Benedict and the asparagus, and just do a nice fruit salad. And my mom is bringing a carrot cake. So real simple brunch. I was like, I could do crepes. That's hard to do unless you have to basically your crepes are ready. Yours will be ready in a few minutes, and then you gotta wait. You know, and it's too early in the day for me when I grill out for a 10 o'clock in the morning kind of thing. So nothing fancy, but it should be tasty. Well, John Ram, that sounds really good. I think I'll contact Eurotubes and see if they want to send me a set for review. I don't want to recommend something that I've not tried, and I don't want to buy a set of probes that I will not use. Maybe I could get them to send me a set of probes for me to review, and then if they're worth anything, I could do a giveaway or something. I see other channels do that kind of stuff, and I don't want to make any money. I will not do paid reviews, and I don't want to be given products. I've been offered stuff, and I turned it all down. But I think that might be a good kind of for the cause compromise where I could do an informed. Hopefully, the company would be happy with whatever my opinion is. And if they're a piece of crap, I won't give them away to anyone. I'll just send them back and say, no, I don't want anyone using these. But yeah, your opinion matters to me there, John, so I'll be glad to give them a try. In my opinion, what matters most in electric guitars? Body type, electronics, wood, poly versus nitro? So many strongly held opinions on this topic. So I'm curious what you think. Body type matters in terms of the comfort. For instance, I love my SG. I wanted to love the Les Paul I used to have, but the Les Pauls, to me, in my opinion, in my experience, due to my body size, I'm 6'2". And if I'm standing and playing a Les Paul, it's fine. It's heavy, but whatever. But if I sit holding a Les Paul, let's see if I can show you this. I can't really lower this anymore. If I don't want to tilt the camera down for this, but I'll stand to show you what I'm talking about. If I'm playing a Les Paul and it's sitting on my knee, then on a Strat or a Tele or even an SG, I've got about this much space between the surface of my leg and the strings. On a Les Paul, my leg is like right here. So I'm already in a much weirder spot because the Les Paul is so sculpted right in this area. It's just proportionate to me. I can't sit and play it. Second of all, here's a Strat in my lap. Tele in my lap does the same thing. SG in my lap does the same thing. 335 in my lap does the same thing. Les Paul in my lap, always, always, always. And so if I wanted to use it for using on the bench or stuff like this, I'd have to have a short strap on it just to keep it right here. And I really want to have it up a bit so I'm not picking right by my leg the whole time. Then I'm looking like I'm in King Crimson, high strapping. So body dimensions matters an awful lot. Body wood matters, and I'm not saying that it has to be, 100-year-old oak dredged up from the bottom of a lake or swamp ash from this particular swamp, or it doesn't have to be extraordinarily expensive. but it does need to be good in terms of doesn't have not any moisture content. That's not going to warp. You can make a good sounding guitar out of almost any kind of wood, but I do think that I've particularly liked alder and ash and certain mahoganies the most. I've played really terrible guitars made of those woods, and I've played really good guitars made of those woods. This is actually pine. It's roasted pine underneath this paint. So, I would say in the realm of a mass-produced guitar, what is something which is consistently good? And that can be basswood, depending on what you play and what kind of finish you like. But in terms of something made by someone by hand, whatever wood those hands choose is probably going to be fine. Electronics matters an awful lot with electric guitars. Poly versus nitro doesn't really matter when you talk about modern polyester finishes or polyurethane finishes. Back in the early '70s, some of those really thick fender finishes were not very good at all. But a current product, I've got nitro on this one, nitro on the EJ, nitro on the Tele, poly on this because I just bought a Fender body, and it's beautiful and it sounds great. I have had no problems with this. I know that if I were to drop these two guitars, this one would look kind of cool. This one would have a big chip out of it because that's the thing about poly. It doesn't ding as beautifully as nitro. It doesn't ding as easily, but when it does, it kind of does the broken glass thing. Electronics is a big deal. I'd say the thing that people overlook is coupling of the neck to the body in the case of a set neck or bolt-on. It can be done right, it can be done poorly. You can have a Gibson that looks beautiful, it costs $10,000, and it's just got all kinds of empty space inside that's filled with glue. You can have another Gibson that was done by a better guy, better builder, and all the voids are, the tolerances inside the neck pocket are much tighter, and it's all high glue or fish glue, and that thing sounds great. You have a Strat where everything just magically is lined up, sounds resonant. You have another one, for whatever reason, the holes were misdrilled, or there's a poorly installed shim, and it just doesn't have that resonance. That matters an awful lot. And also, some necks on some bodies sound better than the same neck on a different body, et cetera, et cetera. Some neck and body combos are okay. Some are terrible. Some are godlike, and it's almost random as to what the best pairing is. The other thing is I can have a really high quality instrument, and if I change the relief, if I give it too much or too little relief, well, obviously if I give it too much, too little relief, it's going to buzz. If I give it too much relief, the wood itself won't have much tension on it. And to me, a neck that has a ton of relief, that gets a little bit rubber bandy, doesn't really have much resonance. It just kind of sounds dead acoustically. Whereas if you have actual tension on the wood under string pressure, the thing resonates better. That's really hard to describe. Apparently, I'm not doing a very good job of it, but the proper setup really can transform a guitar from being pretty good to, wow, that feels great to play. Hey, did Amnesia, should I buy a Fryette for all my non-master volume amps and for my ears? What's my thoughts on the benefits of 1K being spent to lower volume? Seems cheaper than buying another Friedman. Well, I can't tell you whether to get the Fryette or the Sur or the Ox or even the Fractal. I would say that one of those devices would probably do you well, and I think Boss's Waza might be looking at. As to whether it's worth it to you, I can't spend your money for you. But if you have amps that are too loud for you to play, that do not have master volumes, it would be a very good thing to have. I know my buddy Jeff McErlane uses one all the time. Is very happy with the sounds he's getting with not the Fryette. He's using the Ox box. He uses that with all kinds of 100 watt and 50 watt amps. in a small Brooklyn apartment. He uses it on all his live streams. He's been very happy with it, both in terms of the sounds and the reliability and the flexibility. I have heard that Steve is a bit hard to get in touch with. Maybe all his stuff is done through distributors. I don't know who to talk to try the Fryette in person. It may just be the answer to your dreams. I know it's really well built. I know that, but I don't know whether it's the right choice for you. I know the aux box is about the same price. It's about $1,400 each. Sir has got a reactive load with IRs for like $600, and I've got one without the IRs for like $400, and Fractal's got one for like $400 to $500. It's also very good in terms of getting you a safe attenuation. As you spend more money, you also get more options. But look into it. One of those devices would make your existing amps much more usable to you, and that's always a good thing. All right, we're going to get one more question from Gerben, then we're going to take our first of 2 7-minute intermissions. Forgot the question marks before. It's all right. I do appreciate people putting them in, but if you ask a question without them, I try to see them. Sometimes I just don't see the ones without question marks. Hey, Ron Marcel from Austin. What is a tonally JMI correct brand or series capacitor for the AC15C? My go-tos are PEs for pre-90s for radial WEMA, or alternatively Panasonics. I love those little Panasonic EQCs, ECQs, EQFs. I can't remember what they are right now. I love the red WEMAs for radials as well. But what I usually like to get, if I get someone with a JMI AC30 in, I call the owner. I offer them 2 options. One, I can use current production Vichy, which are also called Vichy Roderstein, MKT 18s, MKT 1813s. That's it. Or MK 1813s. Anyway, you can get them from C Distribution, you can get them from Mauser, you can get them from DigiKey. MKT 1813s. That's it. Maybe I'm getting the MKT from the remembering the WEMAs, but Vichy 1813s. I use those a lot. They're very nice modern capacitors, which are totally, both in terms of the build quality, the looks, and the sound, totally appropriate for JMIs. I also offer the JMI owners the option of, I can go on eBay, typically German eBay, and find new old stock gold trophy foils if they want to spend extra money. They won't get any qualitative benefit to the sound. It will not sound any better. It will cost substantially more, but it'll look like it was original. So if you really want to go for it, find the new old stock 60s trophy foils from WEMA or Vima. But if you just want something which is going to be fantastic at a fraction of the cost, though they're not cheap, in terms of bad quality, the Vichy MKT 1813s. But your other choices are quite nice. All right, Diego's here. All right, so it's actually spelled VOIGTLA with the umlaut NDR, if that changes anything. So, Frucht, Land, Fortländer. Is that correct? Fortländer? I'm doing it too much. I'm doing too much. Fortländer. Is that getting there? All right, let me know in 7 minutes. I'll see you guys. So the consensus seems to be that it's Freudländer, Freudländer, Freudländer. All right, I can almost do that. And yeah, I saw your comment there about the English aren't the only ones who rename places. How's life there in Alemania treating you? But the German named Freudländer is not made in Japan, and the Japanese don't call themselves Japanese or the country Japan. And it just is so strange to me that, you think the place would get to name what they're called, what their name is. Anyway, where were we? Okay. Ethos. Okay, yeah, you used to be General Ethos. Now you've been demoted. You asked about using a 606. Yeah, the Vibrolux is a good choice for that. You'll enjoy that. Though I still think Deluxe Reverb is fine the way it is. I don't think I don't think you need more oomph out of that. But I understand the appeal of a 3040 watt 1x12 single carry. I don't know why Fender never made that. They should have made the Pro that. I suppose making the Pro just a slightly less herniated twin. Slightly. Where were we? Hey, G-Ben. I believe that great tube amps show their true colors when gigging at higher volumes beyond 12 o'clock. Solid state amps are great for practice at lower levels. Well, I hear you. I don't disagree with you in some cases, but I also know that if I turn this Deluxe Reverb up all the way, it will sound like ass. Right now it's at about 3. Which is gigging level on most stages around Memphis. If I turn it up to 4 or 5, I'll get a little more oomph out of it. I'm not going to do it now and have to readjust the mic pre. But if I turn it all the way up, it won't do what you want a Deluxe Reverb to do. Well, out of tune there. Let me fix that before I make any more noises with it. But, I think a Marshall does sound good, not choked out by its master volume. Let's see, give all the strings a stretch because it's been raining and the weather's much warmer than it was 2 streams ago. Solid state amps can be great. It depends. Like I said earlier, some modeling has really changed the game with solid state amps, and they are getting better. It'd be ridiculous for me not to acknowledge that. I don't think they're there yet, but they're getting much better. And if your solid state argument is a katana, your argument holds some weight. If your solid state argument is a fractal FX whatever run into a really nice full frequency setup, full frequency, full range, blah blah blah, it can be really hard to distinguish that between that and a mastered recording of a really good tube amp. What are my views and experiences of voltages on an EF86 as far in V1 in terms of compression and tone? I've built that it's about 100 volts and it's super starved but fun to play. There are a lot of things you can do with an EF86. I've got a video when I was developing the Excalibur, trying different brand EF86s, current production, and some new old stock. And watching the voltage change, depending on the tube, was a very interesting part of that. Go through that video, and I also was saying, okay, well, this is the characteristic that I like of this tube, and it correlates to this change in voltage. Maybe I subsequently went back and said, well, if I change the voltage with a current production tube, can I get a current production tube to sound more like the old tube that I really liked? And there was a little bit of that, but by and large, I found that the older tubes were just much better in terms of sound than the current production. But they also had associated changes in the plate and screen voltages due to the nature of the tubes. being, it's a cathode bias circuit, so all these things interact with each other. I was going for particular behavior, and I don't remember off the top of my head what my idealized voltage I ended up with was, but that's a fun thing to play around with. And if you're happy at 100 volts, that's cool. Well, can't you hear me knocking or dancing, Mr. D? Those aren't tweeds, Sash. That's like probably an Ampeg V4. It might have been a silver-faced twin, just cranked, recorded at a chateau that sounded funky with kind of low ceilings with weird mics through a really nice old mic pre that we can't emulate. It's really hard to. It's hard to. It's hard to always know what all the aspects of a recorded tone are, but I know that on the Can't You Hear Me Knocking stuff, most of the stuff done for Exile was done with Ampeg V4s and a couple of silver-faced twins. I think the more interesting album sonically is Sticky Fingers for some of those guitar sounds, and a lot of that stuff was done in Muscle Shoals with whatever amps they had down there. Now, some of that might have been some Tweed stuff there, but I bet it was some Princetons and Twins as well. But a lot of that early 70s Keith Richards stuff was not into the Tweed stuff. He didn't discover that till much later, except for the stuff, the early sessions back when Brian Jones was still in the band that they did over at Chess. I would say, having played a lot of Ampegs, and I've got one that just came in, which I'm looking forward to. I got a old 60s Reverber Rocket that'll be on the channel next week. I have been able to get that sound with a Telecaster or a 335 into most Ampegs of 20 watts or greater. For those of us without Keith Richards' 1972 roadie crew, I would suggest the Reverber Rockets are a better bet for us than V4s. And the V4s are so awful to work on and so beastly poorly built. But check out some 20 to 40 watt Ampegs if you really want to chase the Exile, and it'll also get the Sticky Fingers stuff. Pretty much everything from Beggar's Banquet through maybe the beginning of Some Girls, and you don't want anything after that. You'd be fine with a good Ampeg. And you could get there with a 5E3 Deluxe too, and just a slightly different version on that. But I don't think there's a pedal that'll make a Twin do that sound. I think the Twin would just have to be turned up really loud, and then it comes down to the mic pre and the tape. I also don't think that Keith was the more interesting sound on Can't You Hear Me Knocking. I think you need to look and see what Mick Taylor was using, but that's me. Yeah, Hubert, it's possible the tone cap is way too big, or he could have the wrong value tone pot. This is in respect to John Hogg's tone pot that lost all the treble when it went from 10 to 9. Could just be you've got a 25K pot or a 10K pot or less. Thanks, John. I appreciate that. It's very kind of you. Hey, good. And I already answered that earlier. I don't know if you were here for that. I'm just doing something simple for a brunch for my family. It's just going to be the 4 of us. I'm just doing some Eggs Benedict, some steamed asparagus, hollandaise for both those things, and a fruit salad. And Mom's bringing a carrot cake. So my suggestion of rabbit was met with horror. Hey, I am Chris R. Recent Reaper purchase arrived with a bow chassis and faceplate. Shipping damage. The bow is maybe a 1/4 inch deep and 6 inches long. That's a pretty good drop. Chassis is aluminum. Any good way to reduce the bow? Well, it's really tricky. Most aluminum chassis are not going to be flat like a piece of like an L bracket kind of thing. They're going to have a top ridge as well for reinforcement to make that stronger, which means it's really hard to get anything in behind it. Your best bet, unless you're just really, we'll do it this way. I think that if you were had the stuff to do it at home, you wouldn't have to answer this question because you would have been doing similar things long enough. It's possible that if you take everything off that, hopefully it's in front panel or something, all the pots and stuff off, take it, find a place that a machine shop that does, like motorcycle repair or something. They probably have some kind of device. That aluminum can be straightened, but you need it to be really almost jigged up. If it was just a straight L bend, that'd be one thing, but usually it has some kind of lip, which complicates things. It's also possible that, hey, you just say, this thing was effed up in shipping, I want my money back, and get one that wasn't messed up. Hey, did Amnesia? Amplified Nation Steel 6 string sustained amps. Okay, they're SSS version. Cannot be left on standby. New ones, yes. Anything built before 2026, no. That tells me that they copied Dumble's mistake. I've got another video on the channel. It was an amp made, was it Poland? Was it Slovenia, Slovakia? I don't remember. I had an amp made, it's about 3 years ago. A very nice company had made the SSS, and they copied the Dumble schematic exactly, which means that when the amp was on standby, the bias supply had 700 volts on it, and the cap switch were rated for 500 volts, and the bias supply died in a big fiery way. And I changed the way the standby was done in that amp because Dumble made a mistake. Dumble made a really bad mistake, and all these companies that just copy the Dumble copy the mistake. And it's the kind of mistake that if you look at it for just like 1 second, you're like, oh, you can't do that. It's a derived bias taken from one side of the HT. But the way they Princeton, for instance, also derives bias from one side of the HT. Princeton doesn't have a standby. The JCM 900 also derives bias from one side of the HT supply. The JCM 900 often has failures in the capacitors used in that circuit, though they have a cap between the actual AC secondary and the bias supply. So that cap, in theory, limits that a little bit, though that cap fails quite a bit in JCM 900s. It's, yeah. So it's good to know that Amplified Nation is trying to be authentic, is the kindest way to interpret that. It's an authentic fuck up. Moussaka and pistachio sounds nice. I love moussaka. What do I think about replacing the AT7 and a Fender Reverb with a power MOSFET? Well, you could. I haven't played around with it. I know that it's doable. Pretty much any function of a triode in a Fender or any other tube amp can be replaced with a power MOSFET. I'd have to know about the current driving capability. I've not looked into using L&D 150s as a heavy current driver, because that's a lot of current we're talking about. But I don't see any reason theoretically why it would not be possible. And certainly when it changed the sound. Hanoverian. Well, my family is mostly a mixture of Scots and German as well. And we joke that we kept the German cooking and the Scottish foreign policy. The Cogers and the Keaches on one side and the Lairds and Caldwells on the other. We both made the rabbit joke. It's easy to find a reliable source for rabbit here. You just go down the street at night with a really bright light and you find all the rabbits that come out. Yeah, 700 volts, Brad. What happens when you have an unloaded HT secondary? You get the full potential on just one side. It's great. Yeah, go back and find that video, Brad, on the steel strings. I think I put it under, it might have been under my Tech Tips playlist. It's the only giant red SSS amp on the channel about 2, 3 years ago. And yeah, I saw that mistake and I'm like, oh man. Speaker thoughts on 65 twin reverb reissue. Stock speakers seem overly bright, sharp. Well, James Greenlee, usually the stock speakers on a 65 twin reverb reissue are either the Eminence made for Fender, custom Fender design from the 90s, which are pretty blah, or the C12K Jensens, which are even worse. Those things are real boxy and they have no high end. There are a lot of good speaker choices for a twin reverb reissue. If you think that the stock speaker is overly bright or sharp, maybe something wrong with your amp, because the stock speaker is pretty dark. Right now, you are hearing a more or less stock Deluxe Reverb reissue, 65 Deluxe Reverb reissue, which is very similar in most ways to that twin reverb reissue, through an ET65, which is a very balanced speaker, with a Royer R10, which is a pretty accurate sounding microphone. And, you know, I'm here, bridge middle. That's not bright. That's balanced. You know, if Mark Knopfler were here, I'd turn the treble up a little bit. He could do Sultans of Swing all day long. If I did that with C12K, it would be dark sounding. So maybe something up with your twin. I bet you're 6'3", man. The Dutch are some tall. You Netherlanders. I was at a museum in Paris, and an entire family was in the room with us. And I don't feel short very often. I'm 6'2". But I was the same height as pretty much as the mother and the daughter, and the son and the dad were like 6'9" or so. And before I even heard them speak, I'm like, yeah, they're gonna be from the Netherlands, and they were. Side note. The shoes I brought with me to Paris on that trip were not the most comfortable for 20-mile walks during the day, I discovered on the second day. And I thought, well, no problem. It's a major city. I'll just go buy some Nikes or something to get through the trip. I could not find any store in Paris, Foot Locker, BVH, or whatever the big department store is there. I went to like 4 different places that sold tennis shoes, you know, trainers, whatever you want to call them, and they did not have anything in a size 13 or 14, U.S. size 13, 14. I don't remember what that is in the European size. But not only did they not have them in stock, they never stocked them, and they were horrified by the notion that anyone's feet should be that big. So I know that if I ever need to buy shoes in Europe, I'm heading to Amsterdam or Munchen. I guess probably North Germany, probably even taller. But yeah, the salesman in the Parisian store, which had posters of American NBA players on the wall, were just shocked and appalled that anyone should have feet that big, as if my feet being so big was a deliberate affront, as if I were being gauche. So I could not find shoes to buy in Paris. Yeah, I didn't try to buy any shirts in Italy because I bought too much of their pasta. Hey, John Ram was working on a 67-68 transition era Princeton Reverb. All the coupling caps were little rectangular caps with colored stripes. Yeah, I think of those as like fruit stripe gum from the 70s. Thought they were replacements, but they are stock tropical fish. Yeah, watch out for those. Those fish caps are prone to leakage, and they're prone to the epoxy cracking and moisture getting in. And then the value changes wildly as the temperature and humidity change. They look pretty, but I've seen stock caps in some Very few, but some Fenders from that period. A lot of stuff was happening in 67, 68, and 69. Like in 69, when they changed the wiring in most of the Fender amps, it's like they just bought a whole bunch of surplus, really, really thin wire from the telephone company. It's only that year, and it's only the year that they used the little wire nuts to attach the input jack resistors to the wires going to the tubes. They're fine when they work. The trouble is, as I said, they can leak and they can absorb moisture. There was a, hey, Omelet Socks, do not do that. Would a pot between the output transformer and speaker of an amp work as a master volume? Yeah, for a few milliseconds. All right, I'm running this deluxe reverb, which is nominally a 22 watt amp, measured clean, into a 65 watt amp. A potentiometer is typically 1/3 to 1/4 watt, maybe half watt. You can spend a lot of money by a real high quality 2 watt pot. $35 will get you a 2 watt pot. Well, that'll last a few milliseconds longer than the 1/3 watt or 1/4 watt or half watt pot. You would have, if you had a 100 watt pot, yes, technically it would work as an attenuator, as a master volume. But you'd also have to carry around about a $400 60-pound potentiometer. So it's not really the best way to do that. And man, once that thing gets dirty, no, it won't work. Let's see. Fortlanda with a closed O. Dolores. Oh, in Spanish. Do. As in Dolores. Fortlanda. Well, I've heard, Stepford, I've heard German speakers say, do the, not land, but Länder. So it's confusing. I think I might be hearing different regional accents from different Germans. I'll just say Voigtlander. Y'all can just deal with it. I want to get it right, but it's tricky. Especially when you guys can't even agree with each other. Hey, Robert Israel. I hope you have nothing but joy with that thing, and I hope it lasts forever. I have quibbles with the overall build quality of Stereotones. Some aspects of them are fantastic, and then I don't have long-term faith in the transformers and all the Stereotone branded Holy Grail caps. They're generic under they're unknown specs. I've had them fail, and anyone who prints Holy Grail on something offends me deeply. Not religiously. I'm just like, it's like, that's a load up. Yeah. See, you Germans can't even agree with each other how to pronounce your own damn word or name. So I'm trying over here. Hey, George Conte. Considering either a new Marshall 1974X or Marshall Bluesbreaker amp, should I use the standby switch on either of these? You don't need to use the standby switch on either of those amps, though they both have tube rectifiers. I think they're both potentially very good amps. I think both of them can be made much better, but in terms of the historic models, they're fantastic. They're very different output levels, and they have very different characters. So try to play them before you buy either, but you don't need to use a standby switch on either of those. Hey, Ian. Blues Junior 4 question. Barely used, but died. Notice a blown FR 2.2K ohm 2 watt resistor in the filter cap circuit between the B plus and phase inverter. Ideas what could cause fault? Well, you've got a 2.K resistor in the power circuit. That's a interstage decoupling resistor between one filter cap section and the next, and it is blown, because it had too much current through it, more than 2 watts current through it, which tells me that something downstream of it is drawing too much current, which is probably an indication that the filter cap is shorted or in some way very, very bad, which is very common in the Blues Juniors and all other Fenders that use those gray or blue IC brand filter caps. So it is probably one of the 2 or 3 22 microfarad filter caps in that amp. The good news is it is very easy to replace those capacitors. It is very easy to replace any damaged 2-watt resistors. I've got many videos about that on my channel that you can do yourself if you're comfortable working on an amplifier. There are tricks to working on PCB amps. I have shown many of those tricks, but if you wanted to bring your amp to a tech, it should be a fairly simple, inexpensive repair. And the biggest fault of the Blues Junior are twofold. Crappy filter caps, which a tech can change out. We're talking $25, $30 worth of caps. And if it's the first version of the Blues Junior 4, which has a fixed bias, they bias it way too hot. The tech can easily bias it to about 55-60% idle dissipation, and that will take away a lot of the remaining problems. Or if it's the later Blues Junior 4, which has cathode bias, they bias it way too cold, so the amp won't sound its best, and they don't know how to read data sheets at Fender anymore. It's very sad. These are very inexpensive things for a tech to fix those. So you can get that amp back up better than other. Robert Israel, can I get better transformers for the Cherry Tone? I would say after the amp is built and all together, it's really hard to change out the transformers without spending an awful lot of money. You can have them changed out later. So if you just got a Cherry Tone and you love it, you may never have a day's problem with those transformers, in which case, wonderful. 5 years from now, your output transformer might start acting up. Be fairly easy for a tech to change out that output transformer or a choke. But if you were to take your brand new amp to a tech and say, I need a new transformer, power transformer, new choke, new output transformer, you'd be spending an awful lot of money. Just because some guy on the internet said you might eventually have a problem with it. So I would not preemptively change them. But it would affect my decision-making process to buy one versus buying some other brand's amp, which used a known quality transformer. I understand the appeal of the Cherry Tones as far as you get an awful lot for your money. And it's not quite to the free lunch warnings don't quite come up from that. But it's a little bit iffy, and them calling themselves their stuff Holy Grail. Pull the other one. Stax, yes. It is a fantastic museum, and if you make it to this city, I'll take your ass there, and I'll get you the best fried chicken you ever had in your life right around the corner from there. Yeah, Ted, live guitar was never going to sound like your favorite record. You could have your favorite guitarist playing the song he wrote, the part he wrote, with the guitar he recorded on, through the amp, and everything else he recorded on, and it won't sound anything like what you have in your head or what you remember, even if you remember it accurately, because a recording of a thing is not the thing. All you can do is get to the point where if you ever get recorded by that same engineer in that same studio with the same artistic intent in mind, you're painting a pub. Thanks, Ala Dubinsky. Appreciate that. How big a role do the filter caps play in overall tone of the 2203 circuit, specifically thinking of the transition from 6 to 3 cap cans? Yeah, it's a big difference. The later horizontal input 2203s they omit one of the filter stages, which means that the first two stages are not decoupled from each other. And I find that those amps sound a bit, can be a little bit more buzzy in terms of background bzz, but they're also more raspy sounding. I find that the sound is not as pleasant. Now, some people probably really like that. It pushes it more towards that kind of late 80s. Oh, I don't mean to be, I'll make fun of the genre, but I don't mean to be like, oh, it's hair metal bullshit. The people who love that, that's their favorite sound. I'm sure that if you're really into Dokken, that kind of thing, whether you consider Dokken hair metal or not, is an attribute, that raspiness. But I don't think it's to me, it's as nice as the pre-83 version of the circuit. But one can add the missing decoupling cap and resistor to the horizontal input version. It's fairly easy to do if you don't mind cutting a trace on the bottom of the board, in which case you can fix the one glaring flaw from my perspective of the later circuit. As far as two input, vertical versus horizontal inputs, the only difference between that is on those amps, all the input jacks and all the pots are mounted are attached to the front panel, and the entire board is suspended from that, which means that all those joints over time experience a lot of stress. So if I get a horizontal input 2203, 2204 in, the first thing that I do is I take it out, flip it up, and I find all the numerous cracked solder joints and reflow them. I don't look to see if there are any. The only thing is how many. I know there's going to be many already. They all do it. But once you reflow all that, it's good probably another 10 years if you have all the hardware tightened. As the hardware becomes slightly loose on those things and things vibrate, the cracks exacerbate. But if you get all that nice and redone and tight, all the pots are clean and the jacks are clean. If you add the missing filter stage between the first two stages and the cathode follower driver, then all of a sudden the amp sounds pretty much like it always did. As far as the 6-3 can caps, in terms of the series caps versus single caps, that doesn't really matter as much on the first stages. It's the preamp filtering changes that are so interesting to me, so important. I'm not really being very articulate today. I don't know why. Some days I'm just not quite in it. Yeah, yeah. Like Brad's saying, the first stages, you're fine, 50 or 100, whatever. But it's the preamp, missing the preamp filtering node of the horizontal inputs that really changes. Hey, Colby Jack. Whew, restoring bass from 1860. Yeah, bad work is worse than no work. Yeah, there's probably some MOSFET that can handle a drive current for a reverb circuit. It's got to be, but I don't think LND 150 could do it. I don't think. Maybe there's some way of doing that into a cathode follower kind of trick. I don't know. Hey, Cash Shadow Wizard, I'm thinking of changing your Marshall ST20 combo and Buddha combo to heads. Anything to look out for aside from the aesthetics? I feel like it's relatively simple and drastic mod. Well, it doesn't have to be drastic. You keep the original head cabs and then just buy or make some, keep the original combo cabs and then buy or make separate cabs for the heads. Don't cut the original combo cabs because it'll look like shit, and you won't have the original combo formed for resale. And what if you don't like it? What if you change your mind? If you're capable of truly converting a combo cabinet to a head cabinet, you're also fully capable of making a separate head cabinet, which would be the better use of your time and money. The only other consideration to have when we pop you back up here on the screen is if either of those amps have reverb. I don't know. I don't think the SC20 does, but I don't know which Buddha it is. If you have an amp which has a reverb tank, usually in a bag, if you have it in a combo, well, your reverb tank is 8 inches, a foot away, whatever, from the power transformers. You put all that into a head, all of a sudden your reverb tank is right there by the power transformers. You're going to have massive hum issues. So depending on what amps you have, if you have reverb tanks, you don't want to necessarily make those into head versions. Yeah, yeah, I love being in the south of Europe, and my wife is 5'3", but I have ended up sleeping very diagonally or having my feet hanging off the bed quite a bit. It's worth it. It's worth it. Ah, rickets. Yeah, I'm sure the war was hell on Glasgow and just the general times. Yeah, they were, Brad. And what happened to them? Want to tell the class why we don't do that? I know what umlaut does. That's why I've never been a big fan of different languages use of the umlaut. But yeah, all the metal bands of the '80s they just put umlauts on everything. I always wondered how they the thing how those bands were received in Sweden and Germany. Apparently, most metal bands were received very well in Sweden. Swedish death metal is an odd thing for me to understand. Let's see. Our answer to that. What's a new well-built Vox AC30 sound alike amp, either head or combo? Well, I'm a big fan of the Vox AC30 Custom, the AC30C2 and C2X. Those are really good sounding amps. They sound an awful lot like what they are. As far as sounding like an old one, I'm not aware of anything on the market today, including the hand-wired Vox stuff, that sounds like an old one. I can make the hand-wired one. I can make the new ones sound like, and the hand-wired ones sound like an old one, but they don't out of the box. Now, if you go on guitar forums and ask that, they're going to tell you to get a Bad Cat or get a Matchless. These people are not your friend. They are interesting apps in their own right, but they don't sound anything like an actual Vox, and they also have serious flaws. It's like they took all the worst aspect of a Vox and said, "Oh, let's make that worse," and they did. And because the world is full of people who want to separate us from our wallets for no good reason, the rest of the world said, "That's a great idea. Let's do that. Let's say that thing's good," and they're really not. Which is odd because aspects of those amps, the Bad Cats and the what's it? I just said, what's it called? Matchless. They do certain things, fantastic transformers, fantastic quality parts, really high end pots. They do everything they can as well as possible, and then they do a big stupid thing that undoes all the good work. But then people pay extra money for the big stupid. That's the life, isn't it? I look forward to getting an AC30S S1 at some point, but I have not ever seen one in the wild. Well, that's nice. Nick would never say that. Nick does not like me, and I'm okay with that. But yeah, their ground scheme as the 220304 came into me was not, and that's not the company. For all his unpleasantness to me in the past. They do so much right. They get so many things right. They just knock it out of the park on the hardest bits, and then they get a fundamental wrong. And that's the thing that's strange to me. But that's life, isn't it? That be a good pick. Are you serious, Goody Guitars? Thank you, man. Appreciate that. You know, putting a picture of flowers up for a thumbnail is not a very here's how to be successful on guitar YouTube move. I'm obviously past caring about all that stuff. I thought it was pretty, and I don't point out pretty things very often. Well, I was talking to Nikki this morning. The azaleas is the best they've ever looked. I mean, I've had them there 5, 6 years. They're larger than ever. They're green. The leaves are greener than ever. The blooms are bigger than ever. And we had the first April rain this morning, and there are all these little drops of rain on the leaves of the blooms. Look like little pearls, and all those blooms will be gone that next weekend. It'll all be barren, well, just green. And I was telling Nikki how beautiful it was. And I said, if I point out how pretty a fucking flower is, that's a fucking pretty flower. Because normally I'm like, yeah, it's a flower. Where do I like the bias to be on EL84s, Match J asks. It depends on the topology of the amp. On a cathode biased amp, I want them to be idling between 12 and 14 watts. If it's a fixed bias amp, I want them to be idling between 50 and 70%, just like any other tube in the world. But unlike other tubes in the world, specifically for cathode bias, 12 watts is 100%. I like them to be anywhere from 12 to 14, so 100 to about 110%. And Dan Brock almost missed this one. It's an important point, though. How much money he's wasted buying the wrong pickups because he's using your eyes and brain. Once I actually used my ears, I ended up with an EMG 81. We hear with our eyes an awful lot. I probably do it from time to time myself, and I do try to keep myself in check given what I do for a living. And so I don't want to be that kind of guy who's like, oh, current production, I couldn't possibly. I must, I've got a handful of RCA 60s, RCA 7025s there I use for testing. And I'll tell you, sometimes the current production stuff sounds just fine. But I also don't want to say, this is fine, so anyone who uses that is an idiot. Because the world wants us to be in these little boxes, in these little camps, and I just don't want to play that game anymore. So yeah, choose pickups based on what you like the sound of, and what has turned out to be reliable for people. And a lot of foreign probably right at this moment, there are hundreds of thousands of people typing today how awful and sterile EMGs sound, and how no one should ever use EMGs, while listening to records that they love that were done with EMGs, and the pros are like, I don't read the forums. This has always worked for me. They're using EMGs. They're not in style anymore, but they're as good and as bad as they ever were. Hey, she just ran off. Where did she run off after you started listening to my voice? Because I've heard that can happen. I'm not sure how to take when people say that I'm so calming and relaxing. I'm not sure how to take that. It always there's a fine line between relaxing and boring, and I don't want to bore you. I said, I hope that you are not bored, but I hope that you tune in next week for another edition of Not Boring, but Soothing. Yeah, maybe some kind of Darlington configuration. I'm not sure what all you can do with some of the current stuff. You might be better off just finding, might be something in an op amp package that does that out of the box. But I would certainly want to not be at the stated limits of the current capability. I'd want to have some elbow room. I'm not telling Brad anything he doesn't know. He thinks the same way. You know, it says it'll do it. I want to know if it'll. Do I have a 100% margin or 50% margin? Because I want to have as much of a margin with that kind of thing as possible. On paper, a 12AT7 isn't up to the task. 12AT7 struggles. 12AT7s usually just barely make it, but they make it for a really long time. And if it dies 5 years later, you put another $25 tube in, and it gets another 5 to 20 years. If you're doing a solid state component to do this within the amp and it fails, it reflects badly on you, and it's more expensive to change out. All right, we're going to do Tango Tommy's super chat, and then we're going to take a second intermission. Appreciate that. Oh, used to be sent to me. I know you, Tango Tommy. I know your actual last name. 2204, still kicking it all as well. Just tuned in to learn and wish you and yours a very happy Easter. Thank you very much, Tom. Appreciate you. Let me know if you ever have any problems with that 2204. I try to make it as bulletproof as possible, but people keep making better bullets. All right, I will. Paralleled op-amp drive circuits. Okay, yeah. I don't want to talk too much about solid state reverb driver MOSFET stuff on here and put everyone else to sleep. I've already close enough to that apparently on my own. But it'd be interesting to talk to you about that, Brad, about some options. It's a good idea in theory if it can be reliable. See you guys in 7 minutes. Well, I'm going to make most of the rest of the world jealous. Maybe not John in South Carolina. Maybe not Tango Tommy. But 3 houses down from me, um, I think the family's having a large get together for Easter. But they've got a big truck pulled up in front of their house, and on the back of that truck is attached a flatbed trailer. And on that flatbed trailer is a championship barbecue team set up with the big grill and all that. And it looks like they're doing a couple shoulders and a whole bunch of ribs for that family's Easter celebration. And I walked outside. And, oh man, I need to go make some friends. But I think I'm gonna have to get me some. I had barbecue for lunch yesterday, so it's not really a hardship. But man, the smell of that cooking. Memphis is a very beautiful place when it wants to be. It certainly has beautiful food. I was gonna grill something out for Easter, but negotiating with my ex's family, they got the afternoon, so I'm just gonna do a brunch. Besides, I'm not gonna waste my barbecue on my daughter who doesn't want to eat pork. I'm not gonna barbecue her a mushroom or chicken or something. Oh, I was thinking while I'm finding the next question, the AC10 hand wired has got a power MOSFET used to drive a reverb tank, but it sounds like hell. It does not sound good at all. The AC15 hand wired uses a tube for the same process. And yeah, I know you can do it like they do it in the Hot Rod and Blues series with op amps for specific tanks. Uh, but I don't think that they're real. I don't think they've ever really sounded fantastic, and they're really hard to get the nuance right on those. There are better ways to do it. Um, um, I mean, I know there are a lot of ways to do it. I'm just not sure that a MOSFET doesn't have some new version of a MOSFET on the market might have some advantage that previous approaches have not offered. Hey, Count Domingo, I am very well. We are well. Thank you. Queensryche and Motorhead and all the umlaut bands. Yeah, old AC30s are glorious when they're working right. Um, and I'm glad your azaleas are coming alive. I'm glad to know you actually have spring in Scotland. You know, I've seen the shows and it looks like it's raining all the time. No, I kid a little bit. You do get a little good bit of rain up there though. And U2's going to be gigging an old AC30 in the basement in stereo. Nice. That's a good combination. I saw an article with Carl Verhoeven and Verhoeven. I'm not sure how that's supposed to be pronounced. Speaking of Dutch, um, oh, probably 20 something years ago, and he's talking about his rig. He had a 50-watt Marshall on a 4x12 in the middle, and on either side on road cases, so they're at the same level, height on the stage, two 60s AC30s for his clean. And that was his rig, and he said if he couldn't get a sound with those amps, he couldn't get it with anything. I was like, yeah, that made a long-term impression on me. That's the goal. Let's see. Yeah, I didn't care about the AC. I didn't like the sound of the AC30. Sorry, the AC100 from the mid. You know, the custom thing, James Grimley. The AC100 and AC50. Those things were some strange amps. I didn't think they did any of it quite right. You know, the reverb was passable. You can also do what they did in the AC30 Custom Classic with a high power op amp, high voltage op amp. But again, those never sounded that great for the reverb. The reverb sounds better in the AC30 Custom than it did in the Custom Classic. But let's not make fun of anyone's religion, even in good in in good faith, even with good intent, in terms of let's not talk about liking me or not liking me as some sign of anyone's religion. I'm not kind of trying to criticize anyone. I just don't want to have jokes which offend someone for no good reason. You know, it could be seen as punching down. I don't like punching down or punching for no good reason. Well, I did not mean to contribute to you taking your finger out of your butt, Lester Puck, Ilster Puck. You know, as far as I know, as far as I'm concerned, that can go right back up there, and it's those other guys, not me. Let's see. To have any thought on Soyuz microphones for mic and guitar cabs for a clean Pink Floyd Animal sound? I've never, hey, Green Mystic Surfer, I've never played around with the Soyuz mics. Um, uh, I'm trying to think if I know what they used on animals. Do they not do animals? If they did animals at EMI, there would be a whole bunch of Neumann and ribbon mics, but I don't know what how they recorded animals specifically for the clean Pink Floyd Animals sound. Given that I don't know what the Soyuz is, I would say if I had a Royer R10 or R121, and I had a U87 of any or similar of any good quality between those two mics, I'm pretty sure you could get any of the clean Pink Floyd sounds out of them. And that's not you don't have to spend the money for a Neumann. I mean, this SE Audio 4100 is cardioed only, but they have a 4400 for under $500. That's basically kind of do the same thing as a U87 or a C414. For what I'm doing in a room like this, all I need is cardioed. I could take this and the Royer and do an entire Pink Floyd tribute album if I had someone in here who could actually play like Gilmour. I used to be able to a long time ago, but that was many hand injuries ago. I hope you're kidding. Oh my God. That's got to be a April Fool's gag. The guy's not qualified to take over the QC at the White House, let alone a Fender. Unless that's your own April Fool's joke. You're 5 miles from Rosalind Chapel. It would be nice to. Do they still have all the Da Vinci Code tourists going there all the time? If I make it up to Glasgow, I would very much like to meet you, Martin. Or hell, if I make it anywhere to the north of England or Scotland, I'd make the time to come meet you, Martin. I'd very much appreciate that. I didn't see a double question, so it's cool. Hey, we're actually caught up again. Either I'm getting faster at answering, or I have fewer people here. Actually, I'm having fewer people here than I used to. I'll put it down to people out of town for Easter, or more likely standing in an airport trying to get out of town for Easter. It cannot be that people are less interested in what I have to say. Though there's some regulars here who are not here today. I'm sure that they had busy plans for this weekend. It's one of those weekends, man. You just I almost didn't do this because I need to go to the grocery store and do a bunch of stuff. And then I'm like, that's one of the reasons I'm just doing Eggs Benedict tomorrow. Have a lot less to do. Let's see. I've never had a Rev in Flash. I have no thoughts on Rev amps other than people seem to really like them. The demos I've heard of them seem promising. If I ever have one I'll play it and I'll look inside it, and then I will have an opinion of it. Until then, it's an amp that I'm curious about, but I have no opinion of. Hey, old guy, wallpaper music is keeping quiet. Well, that doesn't do us any good. I need something to react to. Somebody give me something. Otherwise, I'll talk about cameras again. I've really been thinking about a second channel, but it's so hard to think of how on earth to justify another damn camera channel. I mean, I know what I want. The way I want to, one of the ways I want to differentiate is, hey, I took all the advice of all these YouTube channels, and boy, let me tell you, they got some bad advice. Let me tell you all the things that went wrong, and here's the stuff that actually works, and here's the stuff that no one told me about that I discovered on my own. But it's really hard to figure out how to do a first video on stuff like that. Opinions on orange amps. Just you're curious about the OR15. I like some of the orange amps a lot. Some of the others I'm more meh about. I think for the price, some of the solid state stuff sounds good. I think they're very strange amps in the way the tone stack works. It can be a little bit hard to dial in. The bizarre hieroglyphics, instead of saying treble bass, etc., are hard to wrap your mind around. The consistent flaw I have with all current production orange amps, solid state and tube, is that they use really long pot metal pot shafts with split shafts, knurled split shaft pots with really long bushings that are made of really cheap metal, and then they use screw-on set screw knobs, which damage the pot metal split shafts, and they shear off if anyone brushes against them. Now, fortunately, a lot of them have those big handles on the side, and it's kind of recessed, so it's not as likely, but man, those pots break if you look at them hard, and then you have to pull the entire board to fix it. Why they don't change out for a higher quality pot? Why don't they either go to push-on knobs or solid shaft pots to use with set screws? I don't know. But if that's the worst thing I can say about an amp, is that the pots aren't as good as they could be in terms of those issues, that's not much of an indictment. And you can get really good sounds with them. I've played a bunch. I've never played one that made me think, damn, I need to get me one of those. I've played a whole bunch. I thought, I see why someone likes it. And visually, it's distinct from all the other amps out there. And I hope that they're happy. Yeah, I've been going through my share of that this past couple of weeks, Brad. Past month or so. I get inspired to do what I do. And then the world has been giving us all a hell of a mental beatdown recently. And it's just so discouraging. And this stuff does not seem very important, because in the grand scheme of things, it's not. And I'd be a fool to take myself so seriously as to think that anything I do on here is making a damn bit of difference in the world. Though, maybe in some small ways, I'm moving the needle towards positivity for some. Speaking of which, hey, Pedro Perry Jr., thank you very much. Have you ever worked on an AC125? I don't know what an AC125 is. I've never heard of that. Let me see what that is. Greetings from Lisboa. Well, obrigado. Thank you very much, Pedro. I love Lisboa. Let's see. AC125. What is that? That's Air Canada flight number. Let's try a different amplifier. Oh, an acoustic. An acoustic 125. The AC125 is a germanium. Let's see. It was a germanium transistor. It was a tungsten amplifier, It was a acoustic model. I don't know which AC 125 you mean. Um, since I don't know the answer immediately, I probably have not worked on an AC 125, but I really Vox 125 lead and bass stacks 81. Oh, the 83 Rose Morris era. If you mean that, that's not a very good amp. The Rose Morris era, pretty much from about 1970 to 1989, was a bad period, and really until the TBX series came out. So many companies were buying the Vox name and kind of sort of putting stuff out with it that kind of sort of matched what Vox used to be, but not a fan of all those in betweeners. But man, I was going through our vacation videos, photos the other day with Nikki, and we really missed Lisbon. We need to get back at some point. It gave us Vino Verde, and it gave us peri peri sauce, or peri peri sauce, depending on your take on the whole thing. And disability exams puts me in my place. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But at the same time, I've been trying to get some work done so I can pay my bills. So I've not been able to go do too much community outreach. But you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Well, Diego, a lot of times you're only seeing the people who gave a thumbs up at the time you entered a chat. It's possible that people have since given me a thumbs up. It would be nice if everyone gave me a like, but I don't. I'm not going to pander for it. They tell you every video you watch, if you want to build a YouTube channel, is to say, hey, always say, don't forget to hit that like, don't forget to hit that subscribe, smash that like button, blah blah blah, join my Patreon at blah blah blah, and become a member, and blah, not no offense to you, Brad, I know you do the memberships. And if you want to buy me a coffee, the link's beneath, and join me over at blah blah blah, and don't forget I'm also on this, and just constantly remind you how the basic functionality of YouTube works, and like and subscribe. I just do that one little please like and subscribe that scrolls down at the 30-second mark of every video, and at the beginning of each hour of this, and at the very end of this, I do the thing that comes up on screen for 30 seconds or whatever it is. I don't want to be always talking about that stuff, and I also don't want to talk about Curiosity Stream. I don't want to talk about Squarespace. I don't want to talk about VPNs. I don't want to talk about this video game that just came out that's gonna give you lots of junk on your phone. All the stuff that I'm supposed to do. No, I'm just not going to. I figure if you need a VPN, you're going to research a VPN and not ask me about that stuff. If you want to play a video game, you already know the video game. Curiosity Stream, actually, it's pretty cool, but that's not what I do. I'm not here to hawk that stuff. I have considered getting myself an account on what's the one that's like YouTube without all the weirdness. Join me on blah blah blah. Anyway, they have the service because I miss Lindsay Ellis videos, and Zafrank's got some other information on there. There's a lot of good channels that have a lot of good information that's been taken off YouTube these days. But man, I can only chase so many fireflies at once. So I'm just kind of here. Glenn from Spectre Sound Studios is also into cameras and photography. Is it something that comes with a profession in audio? I don't know. I've noticed a lot of musicians also tend to like watches and cameras, and I don't know if it's just something in our DNA or if it's a reaction against all the digitization of everything. You know, I like that we figured out how to make a little thing that does this one thing really well with some style and panache. And, as far as, why would you need this? I just use my iPhone. This is a 17 Pro. This is until this past, and the 16 Pro, until 6 months ago, this was the best phone camera offered. And, it's not that different from the new greatest phone camera ever offered. They're absolute shit in comparison to this, or even to this old one from 2005. Oops, I just knocked over some amp panels because of the strap. This $200 total investment camera and lens from 2005. It's so much better than the phone on this thing. It's just ridiculous. I'm not the phone on this thing, but it's terrible as a phone, than the camera on this thing. So I think, and I've also noticed a lot of us cook. So I don't know why, but I think it's cool. I don't know Glenn, but sounds like he's my kind of guy. Yeah, I mean, Brad knows the flaws of the Voxes, and all the flaws on the current Voxes are easily fixable. The oranges, I think, have a few more flaws, but they do different things. And the guy who's happily giving with a dark Terror 50, whatever they call the thing, you can't get that sound from a lot of other amps. They do certain things very well. Fire Salt, 5E3 kit. Dissatisfied with the sound. Thinking about changing the tone stack to Blackface Fender. Thoughts on implementation before or after volume? Don't. It'll neuter that amp, and you won't have the topology of a 5E3 is not such to allow that. You need makeup gain that amp does not have. Before you do that, dissatisfied with the sound, make sure you built it right. It's a kit. Did you build the kit? Most people build kits wrong. Nebula, thank you, Ted. Yeah, Nebula. And I miss Lindsay on YouTube. She does it a little bit, but Nebula is where she's really moved to. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. 5E3s, when built right, when paired with the correct speaker, are phenomenal, and you can get sounds with them very comparable to what you can get with a Blackface Fender, just without all the knobs to turn. But most people who build kit amps think that they've built it right, and they haven't. I'm not saying that you haven't. Maybe you're one of the there's always bell ends. Maybe you're at the good side of the curve, and it's just not the amp for you. But most people who form an opinion about an amp model based on their kit build of that amp model have still not tried, still not heard, still not played the actual thing. So I can't tell you whether or not you really like or really dislike the 5E3 amp. It sounds like you don't like your 5E3 kit. You may not be using it correctly. I'm not saying that you are ignorant or you are in any way not intelligent. I'm saying that most players, for the first time that they encounter a 5E3, don't really know how to set it because it's not as intuitive as people think. And you absolutely cannot convert it to the Blackface tone stack unless you want to just give up all the gain that the amp would normally be able to achieve. It's not for that. If you want that, buy a deluxe reverb. Thanks. I mean, we do appreciate it, but we also don't take ourselves very seriously. We take our audience seriously. We take you guys seriously. We feel some level of responsibility to bring you good content and to be honest and all that. But we're not changing the world with this stuff. We're not even changing the amp industry. Otherwise, there'd be a lot better amps out there in the world. But, we do try. It just feels like in the light of everything else, it's a very small contribution sometimes. Hey, Chris at Rift Amps. For those of you who do not know, for those of you who get out from underneath your rock and check out Rift Amps, if you need good amp work done in the UK, he is doing great stuff. And he's also very much into cars, apparently. So I know that many of you probably are. I have not gotten the car bug, but I think Chris has got a bad case of it. So if you're into amps and cars, Rift might be a real good fit for you. Hey, Robbie F., I'd love to check it out, as long as shipping's not insanely expensive to from. I had some irons in the fire to get Rev to send me something to check out, and that didn't happen. So I think they're already selling enough amps, without my opinion, either way. And I could only potentially hurt them. They didn't say that. I think that was the gist I took from it. Hey, Richard, I don't know anyone in Charlotte, North Carolina, but I would call the guys at Mojotone, who are also in North Carolina, and ask who they know in Charlotte, because any tech in North Carolina is going to be ordering stuff from Mojotone all the time. They're going to know everybody, and they'll have good tips for you. They'll probably be able to hook you up with someone. Were the Gibson Lab series any good? Yeah, BB played one, and Ty Tabor from King's X. Those are probably the two most famous players of the Lab amps. The Lab amps are really interesting sounding amps. BB just said his like it was a twin. It was just a loud amp that Gibson gave him that he used, and he was happy to get paid to use it. He just said his was a big clean amp, and they're good for that. They're good sounding solid state amps. Ty Tabor is the guy who really found what it could do, because it had a really unique distortion overdrive lead sound with a really interesting optical compressor. Not optical, but it has an interesting compressor circuit. But they are very expensive amps to restore these days, and they use some inductors which have not been made for a really long time. If all it needs is new capacitors, it's a good gamble. But there's some chips in that amp, especially in the compression circuit, which have not been made since like 1987. And if you can even find them, they're going to be expensive and hard, but it's going to be hard to find. I think for the larger ones, the L9s, the L5s and stuff, there's no guarantee that they're going to be serviceable these days. I could be wrong. Someone out there maybe is like, yeah, I specialize in restoring those. I've got a stash of all that. If there is that person, I don't know them. And they're not very aesthetically pleasing amps to the eye. That's my subjective take. But they certainly have done some cool sounds. Ooh, been there, man, Chris. It's fun. What happens to me, and Chris and Brad will laugh at this, is I'll have a Fender on the bench, just like this Deluxe Reverb reissue right here, and I have it powered off but plugged into the wall because I'm a professional. I know to be careful, and I will just forget, and I will my arm will brush against just over this lip right here, and just touch the top of those two lugs on the power switch. So for a brief moment, I got 120 volts AC right there. And it doesn't kill me. It doesn't even hurt really so much as it says, unpleasant. It's unpleasant. Don't want that. That could have been bad. But then when that happens, it doesn't happen very often, maybe once or twice a year, but after that happens, for the next 6 weeks or so, I'll be like working on a chassis. I'll be over here at this end of it, and I'll just like catch one hair in like a little crease of the chassis where the two sides, the corners go together. So anyway, I'll just tug on a hair, and for the second that I'm tugging that hair, for that split second, I'm being electrocuted. This is a big one, Elizabeth. So I am very mindful of that stuff at all times until I get lax and brush my same damn arm against the same two lugs on a Fender that's plugged into the wall. Yeah. Do as I say, not as I do. Oof, sorry to hear that, Brad. I have not worked on a Morgan Dual 20 head. their power level control seems like a good idea. I've not seen what they're doing. I have worked on some Morgans, and I was very, very, very unimpressed by the terrible mistakes that they made. For instance, little things like using filter caps which were not rated for the voltage present. So once you do that, and the build quality of the whole amp was terrible, and they've done it. It wasn't in one amp; it was in like 4 different Princeton clones. If they keep making the same mistakes, I give them less benefit of the doubt. I can't take that company seriously because they don't take their customers seriously. So I don't care if they've got a great power level control when they don't know how to read a voltage rating on a capacitor and say, hey, this is rated for 400 volts. We only have 470 volts here. This should be good. Hey, Buffalo Gruffalo. In the Deluxe Reverb Doghouse, after moving C31, is it okay to jumper R65 or need to remove it? Can you explain how R66 helps bleed voltage after powering down? Thanks and happy Easter. Happy Easter to you too, Buffalo Gruffalo. Hopefully, what you're talking about is C31 is the 100 microfarad, like 150 volt cap in series with the 47 microfarad 500 volt cap. In which case, I always remove that capacitor. Then you have to jumper, if R65 is the like 100K resistor that was in parallel across C31, you have to jumper R65 or no voltage gets to the remaining filter cap because it was going in series. So you can either remove and jumper R65, or you can jumper where C31 used to be. Either way, there needs to be a straight wire taking the place of where you used to have the capacitor and resistor in parallel with each other. At that point, the circuit is just like the old one, only instead of having 2 16 microfarad caps in parallel for 32 microfarad for that reservoir stage, you've got a 47 microfarad cap. You won't hear the difference between 32 and 47, or if you do, it's to your benefit. As far as how R66 helps bleed voltage after powering down, that's what, a 470K or 220K resistor just across the remaining 47 microfarad capacitor. Let's see if the best way to explain this without giving Chris and Brad fits. A capacitor is like a battery that charges and discharges, and it does it in cycles. It charges and discharges. And if you have a resistor from the positive of that cap to ground, there's also a path through the resistor for voltage to go. Now, if you were to have that capacitor, which charges and discharges, in parallel with like a 1 ohm resistor, which is pretty close to a straight piece of wire, then the capacitor would never charge because all the voltage would drain through the resistor instead. It'd be a faster path to go to ground through that resistor than to go through the windings of the capacitor. But if you have a large value resistor, in this case, say 220, 470K, at the moment that capacitor wants to charge, it's faster. It's an easier path for the AC to go, the DC to go into the capacitor than to go through the resistor. It takes longer to go through the resistor, so the capacitor charges and discharges, and behaves as if that resistor is not there. So from the circuit's point of view, if you're talking about one capacitor in parallel with one resistor, if the resistor is large enough, then that resistor is not in circuit at the moment the capacitor is active. The capacitor is charging, discharging as the DC continues to come in. If the DC stops coming in because the amp is powered off, for a while that capacitor is charging and discharging. After a while, all the voltage, it can no longer charge, it can only discharge. But now it has a path to discharge because it can go through that resistor to ground. So all the stuff that was in that capacitor, just like a battery drains to that resistor, and it takes a while for it to drain. If it were a smaller value resistor, it would drain faster, but then the capacitor would never behave normally in normal operation. So think of it as using the the large resistor to drain the circuit when the circuit is off, but to be out of the circuit when the power is on, if that makes sense. Yeah, Lindsay Ellis is fantastic. For those of you who don't know, she does incredible actual criticism and reviews of film and movie and books. She's also an author. She's incredibly intelligent, incredibly articulate, and got a great personality. And she was all over YouTube until apparently the YouTube comments attacked her crazy reason because YouTube's gone to YouTube. And then there were length limitations and copyright limitations. It's really hard to do criticism and reviews of things that are like movies and films and TV shows if you can't actually show scenes, which you can't do with the copyright strikes on YouTube, but you can do on Nebula. So she's moved most of her content there. And other channels I really like on there. But it is what it is. But she is, I'm really impressed with her. Her and Z Frank might be two of my favorite YouTube channels. She is by far the more impressive one. And Nerd Writer was another one I really liked. I don't know if he's gone all the way to Nebula only. I don't see him on YouTube anymore, but I really liked Nerd Writer back in the day. I get so tired with reviews of shows these days. You see, hey, we're going to review the new show or the new movie or whatever. It's not a review. It's a total recap or someone reacting to it or, hey, what did that meaning of blah, 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 really, what did that ending really mean? It's like, okay, I'm not in kindergarten. I know what it means. I know everything you're telling me. I saw the show. You're not giving me any insight. It's just such a, the bar is so low for reviews these days. And it scares me that there's an entire generation who thinks that's what a movie or TV show or book review is. A bad recap, a bad synopsis, followed by some overly emotional reaction. Hey Pedro, yeah, I would avoid all the '70s Voxes. They were Vox and badge only. Different companies kept buying the rights to sell them, and they kept making them worse and worse. The current production AC-15 and AC-30 custom, the C series, are so good, and especially on the used market, the AC-15 custom is so inexpensive. You're going to get a better, more reliable amp. But yeah, we had a great time in Lisboa. And I miss the pastéis de Belém, which is one of my favorite things I've ever eaten in my life. Pastel de nata, good. Pastéis de Belém, oh my God, so much better than the other ones. And now I really wish I had about 4 of those and a big cappuccino. I pretty much always wish I had 4 of those and a big cappuccino. Yeah, I mean, it's so hard. The other day, we sent astronauts back to the moon at the same time senior levels of government are arguing against vaccines and the core elements of science. We live in such an upside down world where half the leadership aren't qualified to pick up dog shit for a living, let alone tell us, the rest of us, how the world works. Meanwhile, particle physicists quietly just keep on. It's amazing. But yeah, horology is such an impressive achievement, which is all hidden by the fact that they figured out how to sync these up to satellites. Now we all have great clocks all the time. Well, no, it's just a computer reading off a satellite these days. And the satellite's the accomplishment. Of course, we've got flat earthers who argue that the satellite, I'm not sure how they figure out satellites. How many flat earthers around the world right now are typing on their computers, sending up geosynchronous orbit satellites to tell each other how flat the fucking place is? I think if you're anti-science, you should not get computers. I mean, as in you should not be allowed. If you're anti-vax, if you're anti all this stuff, they should all be confiscated. No more internet for you. Just go carve stuff in stone and shout it from the rooftops like you deserve, and let the rest of us get on with the century we could have been having. If you don't like the 5v3, you don't like the 5v3. Just most people who've really heard and really figured out how to use the 5v3 love the 5v3, even if they don't love it for everything. But you could be the weirdo who doesn't like it. That's fine. I don't like lemon. Other people seek it out. Let's see. It was the 100-watt basement that almost got Chris. I know that the amp that eventually gets me will be something that I don't even consider a real amp. That'll probably be like, oh man, I shouldn't even take that in. All right, I'll do as a favor. Let's do this in 5 minutes. That's the day I'll bite it. What's my opinion on soldering the protective earth wire straight to the chassis? I always find it a bit fishy when I see it. Well, there are two ways to view that, Easter Puck. If you have an IEC cable, so there's an actual IEC receptacle, you don't. You put in a bolt and you have a dedicated 18 or gauge or thicker green or green with the yellow stripe wire as short as possible without being under tension from the IEC receptacle to a dedicated solder point on the ground with ground lug and lock nuts and lock washers and all that stuff. That's one safety code. The other safety code is if you have a power cable which is not an IEC, a non-removable power cable, then the ground must be longer than the hot and neutral, so that if there is too much stress and it pulls out and something were to break inside and the hot were to break off of its connection and touch chassis, and in 240-volt countries, it could be either side of the 240-volt, that the chassis would not be live because someone might be touching the chassis or have a guitar plugged into the chassis, so the strings are at chassis potential. So you want to always have the ground longer than the hot and neutral, so that if the wire is pulled in such a way to break one of those things off while it's plugged into the wall, and the hot were to touch the chassis, it would short out and blow a fuse, trip a circuit breaker, but the chassis would not be live. If the ground wire is shorter than the hot, you can pull it out and the ground would break first, and then you will not even know that the ground is broken. Then the hot breaks off, touches chassis. That's how someone gets seriously injured in performance, et cetera, et cetera. In which case, you can either attach the longer ground to chassis using the same kind of dedicated screw and nut and hardware and ground lug, or in a grandfathered in amp like a 60s Fender, you can solder it to the chassis so long as you have a very good, reliable solder connection that's away from all the other solder joints, not shared with anything else in the amp, and that's absolutely fine. And that's what you see me do when I'm restoring old Fenders from the actually up through the 70s on old Fenders. And when I'm, especially when I'm installing a new grounded power cable, that's the first time anyone's made a ground in that area. I'm making it over by the other side of the power transformer, between the power transformer and the edge of the chassis, out of the way of everything else. If I get a Marshall from that era, I don't ground to the chassis very typically. I usually use hardware the way Marshall used hardware for their stuff. But unlike Marshall, I don't want to use brass hardware with black oxide washers because those things are dissimilar metals and they corrode and get grungy and become unreliable grounds over the decades. I use stainless steel into a steel chassis or stainless steel into an aluminum chassis. And if I'm mounting to an aluminum chassis, I then coat the entire thing, the entire ground assembly when I'm done with a clear acrylic to keep oxygen away so that you don't get the dissimilar reaction between the metal, the stainless steel, and the aluminum. That's a rock solid, one rock solid way to get a ground. But when you solder directly to a steel chassis, oxygen is not going to get inside that solder joint, so you don't have to worry about that at that point. That's why it is a very good ground, even if it doesn't look quite as reliable from the outside. Yeah, the circuits, the divided by 13 circuits that I've seen are just variations on Fender and Marshall and Vox, just put together in different combinations. It's the build quality of the old divided by 13 circuits that are so out to lunch. Some real bullshit going on in those old divided by 13s, like tube spacing, just guaranteed to nuke tubes. Bias pots being regular pots, just kind of duct tape middle of a board. Everything held together with solid core cloth covered wire, without any, even when that was insufficient for the current present. It's owned by Two Rock these days, or the guy who owns Two Rock bought Divide by 13, and all that stuff is getting fixed. They're keeping the good parts of the circuit, but they're fixing the bad build quality. The people sure paid extra for that bad build quality because they had figured out how to make the Tolex go like that on the front of their cabinets. The world is a funny place. I have no experience with Ashen amps, Richard. Sorry. Yeah, Two Rock bought Divided by 13, and they're doing much better. All right, see, Brad replaces C31. I prefer to replace R65 with a jumper and leave C1 holes empty. That way I don't have to do a jumper that's, half an inch long versus 2-inch long or whatever. We're electronically achieving the same thing. I just have to use less wire. Angela Collier, I'll look for that. Thank you, Ted. Appreciate that. Yeah, it was just a way to get some headroom, I think, in case someone were to take out the tube rectifier and put in one of the Weber, what do they call them? Weber copper tops, whatever, the Weber copper rectifiers. The solid-state plug-in rectifier, and all it was like a 10-watt resistor and some diodes in a thing that looked like a tube made of metal in an octal base. Anyway, because there were just buy off the shelf solid state replacement modules, including the ones that Fender used in like the first Bassman LTD reissues, the 59 Bassman LTD reissues. They came with that Weber solid state replacement. I think they just put that in the deluxe reverb so that if the not wall voltage, B plus exceeded 500 volts, they'd have that bit of overage. If you're using a 5U4 GB or GZ34, it will not go over 500. Yeah, good. We watched the Gecko's video the other night. His two best, I think, three best, koalas. Man, Brad, if you haven't seen his koala video, I need to send that to you. Mud Skippers and Sad Cat Diary. But Koalas had the best theme song. Hey, Sagest Owls Reviews. Did late 70s pull boost deluxe reverbs have different transformers than early models? No. My 78 is very unwilling to go into saturation. At the same volume level, my 65 deluxe reverb reissue distorts way more. Thanks. Output section is very different. It's got the way the phase inverter is done is very different in those amps, and the tapers of the pots are very different. You cannot compare the two directly. You can make this. Any good tech can make your 78 behave exactly like your 65 reissue. Any good tech can make your 65 reissue behave just like your 78 by changing 10 or less components. But the transformers are the same. Hey Gerb, on an AC15C on the Power 2 PCB, I've spotted that the cathode trace is very too close to the plate output connector. Is this a possible known location for arcing needing some trace removal? Hey Gerben, you got a good eye. On one side, it's really close to the plate connection, the primary connection lug, is very close to a grid. On the other side, it's very close to a screen trace. Not very often, but sometimes those have arced, in which case I leave the large connector for the output transformer primary, obviously, and its trace, and I'll just cut the screen and or the grid trace away from that area and just replace that with some wire. It is not a perfect amp, but if that happens, it's not going to typically burn much. It's a little scorching and then poof, it burns open. I have seen that 2 or 3 times out of a couple hundred of them at this point. It's fairly easy fix. I wish they didn't have to fix it. I told Vox, hey, you got that problem. You got a problem with one of the traces run under the reservoir cap, or is it the 100 microfarad screen node cap? There's some traces run beneath the filter caps which aren't ideal, and then those 2 traces one of which you discovered are not always a problem, but they can become a problem. But it's also a fairly easy thing to fix that one. Hey, Wes, I'm glad you made it. I hope that they do fix it in a revision. I've not seen it changed yet. But I have not had all of their production come through here, which is good because I would not have the space to keep it. Yeah, Robbie, would that'd be a totally different stream, which I would love to do that, but I don't think that's what this channel's supposed for. You can't make lemonade with limes. That's one of the reasons limes are better than lemon, because you cannot make lemonade, which does not need to exist. And I occasionally want a slice of lime in like an amber beer, but I never want any lemon with any food or beverage, including Meyer lemon. It's still a fucking lemon, man. Yeah, we're not here to tell you that you're wrong for not liking the 5E3, but an awful lot of us really find that a very appealing amp, both to play and for those of us who are techs. As a design, it is quite the odd but beautiful thing. And it can be improved on fairly easily. I think Chris knows exactly what I'm talking about. And yeah, we're not trying to pile up on the original poster who doesn't like his 5E3 kit, but most people set them wrong and don't have any idea how to approach them. And so, Doc, it hurts when I do that. Don't do that. It does not. It does not. Unless you say orange, which is not how the word is pronounced. It's orange. I do not like Hefeweizen, not at all. When I was in Oxford, was that last year? God, it seems like a week ago or 10 years ago. It was a beautiful afternoon, and went to this little pub on the banks of a little tributary of the Thames in a neighborhood in West Oxford, West Oxford, well away from the tourist area. And I was sitting outside, and I had a lager and lime out in the sunshine. It was gorgeous. I don't always want lime with beer, but with the right lager, including a Mexican lager, or in this case, it was a British lager, works really well on a sunny day. But lemon can fuck right off. Michelle wants a Scottish Terrier or a medium Schnauzer. She does not want a Scottie. Scotties are unreliable. They can be real aggressive to kids. They want to hunt and kill things. They're not great pets. Medium Schnauzers are fantastic, really smart, really gentle, still protective, and they'll kill the hell out of a rat. You won't have rats or mice if you have one. But go for the Schnauzer or almost any other breed. Scotties have been too neurotic and aggressive, at least the ones that are bred around here. Schnauzers are so much better. Plus, Schnauzers have a beautiful, soft, coat. The Schnauzer, the medium or mini Schnauzer, the coat is gorgeous and nice. Hey, A. Zimmer. Well, I don't know. I've always recommended these Electro-Harmonic 7025s for the past year and a half. Brad had a bad batch, and this is the first one I've tried since Brad's reports for a bad batch. I'm about to find out if this is working well. If this doesn't work well, I like the tongue saw 12AX7s, but they can have problems. I can't use them in a cathode follower stage. Can't use this in a cathode follower stage either. But in like a Marshall 2203, 2204, any of the Russian tubes, especially the tongue saws, can be noisy in V1 with that unbypassed 10K cathode, whereas JJ ECC83, which is a Slovenian tube, or Slovakian, I always forget which one, is fine. But sometimes the tongue saw 12AX7s have channel leak in fenders, and it has to do with the cathode versus the plate, whereas the Electro-Harmonic 7025 doesn't seem to have that issue. So pretty much this, and sometimes the tongue saw, and hopefully this is still good. I don't have the big issue that Brad had, but the JJ ECC83 is still always one possible very good choice. Now, for about 3 years, they had an issue with the glass was really thin right after COVID, and the glass lost vacuum. If you looked at the tube too hard, that seems to be gone. They seem to be reliable again. So it's Slovakian. Okay, good. No offense to all my Slovenian and Slovakian friends. In the middle of a conversation like this about other things, I always forget. I know where each one is on the map, but I forget which one. Because for a long time, it's just all Yugoslavia and Czechoslovakia, and it was easy for me to keep all that stuff straight. And now there's a whole new map for me to keep straight, and it's hard for me to remember the difference in Slovakia and Slovenia. Sorry. Hey, Scotties can be wonderful, but most of them I've met have been way too aggressive. And Schnauzers, every Schnauzer I've met has been very nice. Plus you get to talk to Schnauzers like, Hogan's Heroes, You a Schnauzer? Are you a Schnauzer? Very interesting. Again, much love to our German peeps out there. Hey, you know what's even better than that, Buffalo Gruffalo? White asparagus, which is what I'm going to seek out for tomorrow. If I can't get that, I'll get some fresh green. Marinated in olive oil and lemon juice and oven roasted at 220 degrees Celsius for 12 minutes. Even better than that is leave out the fucking lemon juice so you actually taste the asparagus. But olive oil is great. And then I would just give it a nice fresh vinaigrette after it's cooked. I don't like to cook with acid. If I'm adding any acid, I want it to be fresh and at the end. All right, we are at the end of the third hour, and I've got to do a whole bunch of stuff. So, to those of you who love Scotties, I'm sure your Scotty was the best dog ever, aside from our dog Bella, who's actually the best dog ever. But I've had too many encounters with very aggressive little Scotty fucks. No offense to you, Martin. Scotty's not Scottish. And I have never met a Schnauzer that wasn't not only sweet, but curious with a good sense of humor. And that's a nice trait. Plus, they don't have a wiry coat. Very soft, beautiful coat. But for those of you who love your Scotties, you're right. I'm wrong. And let's see, let me press the magic buttons. I always forget to do at the end of this stuff. And to the rest of you Scotties, beam me up.